Good morning. I'm out here in our West Coast studios with Joe Urban from Potrero and with Eric Kriegstein from Respirix, both Theranova properties. And thanks for taking time this morning, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump right into it. The MedTech industry right now has so much conversation going on about the investment community and first-time CEOs and the talent around that, and the investment community evaluating that risk, and then the tech coming out. And with the two of you out of the Theranova property, not many people know about Theranova, so I thought this was a great chance for me to showcase it and talk about what it meant to you and what it's meaning to you right now. So why don't you guys both introduce yourselves?
Sure. I'm Joe Urban, CEO of Potrero. We are a commercial stage company with a product that's used in the operating room and the ICU to predict the future status of the patient should the status quo not change.
Mm-hmm. And the focus around that, and you were being really, really humble with that, but that's a predictive analytics, data analytics play
right.
on acute kidney injury, which is a $10 billion a year market.
That's right. Taking real-time data from the patient and giving the medical teams actionable insights on what's happening with the patient. Taking a device that's been relatively unchanged for 100 years, the urinary Foley catheter, and placing sensors in the catheter and extracting some pretty incredible insights on what's happening with the patient.
Yep. And I want to come back and dig in a little further on that. And Eric?
Yeah, so I'm Eric Kriegstein. I'm the CEO of Respirix, and we're developing a new way to actually monitor and manage cardiac health non-invasively by measuring a signal that's transmitted through your breath that's never been exploited before for this purpose.
And what market?
And so, we actually believe that our technology has platform potential. We're a clinical stage startup, so we're pre-commercial earlier. So we've been laser focused on a very large opportunity, which is effectively managing heart failure patients, CHF patients remotely.
That's a huge market.
It's a very large market. So in the U.S., it's a 6 million patient population. The cost to the U.S. healthcare system today, both direct and indirect, is about $34 billion by the last count, and that's expected to more than double by 2030 as the patient population ages. And I've seen global estimates at about 108 billion in the last paper I found.
That's a big market. And with the aggressive growth of structural heart, and you and I chatted about this last week on a call from New York, we're just graduating more patients downrange from a structural heart issue of mitral or aortic or tricuspid right into CHF.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's it is a growing market, and the need to effectively monitor and manage these patients in a cost-effective, non-invasive way is growing as well. So it's given me a lot of excitement about what we're working on here at Theranova. It really brought me to this seat, frankly.
And so both of you are CEOs at Theranova, and I've known Theranova for years and Dan Burnett's efforts there, but the community doesn't know a lot about it. So first, let's talk about your background, Joe. Let's share your background.
Sure. I came from robotics prior to Potrero with Fred Moll. We were starting Auris Surgical Robotics, now Auris Health. They're commercializing a robotic system that's used in the lung right now. And prior to that, CR Bard, Boston Scientific, a couple of startups as well, mostly in sales and marketing and commercial roles that had global responsibility outside the United States as well.
And just as importantly, you served our country.
I did. I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2002 to 3, early in the war with the U.S. Army. We had a mission to open up the country, and we did.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Eric, your background previous?
Yeah, so a little bit different, actually. I was an investor here in San Francisco working for a privately owned venture fund. Most of the focus was actually on the software sector, but I had a lot of autonomy to invest in different categories. And so I became very interested in what was happening in MedTech, and in particular, this intersection of new data streams from patients, new ways to analyze them using cloud computing, machine learning. And I had an opportunity to actually see Dan's inventor of the Respirix technology, Evan Luxon, pitch an event. So I actually became involved as an investor before I decided to work full time on this company.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a belief in a tech, huh?
Yeah.
Total
absolutely.
pivot, jumping right in.
And we are here, just if when you see the ambient or hear the ambient noise coming around, or the bicycles coming through, or the dogs coming through, we're shooting live from Theranova. So as you look around, you'll get a feel for all the action going on. So
Yep.
my sound man may be, just...
We'll just roll with it.
So, Joe, you had so many opportunities working out of a Fred Moll company with
Right.
Auris and surgical robotics, the tech du jour. Why Theranova? Why did you come here?
Well, Theranova has approximately 13 portfolio companies. Potrero is one of them. We are the furthest in the cycle. We are a commercial company. I know the space pretty well from my time at CR Bard, and I understand how deceptively difficult it is to solve what Dan and his team solved. And initially, I was invited to join the board of directors, and so I did. And I sat on the board for about 6 months, was able to see what was happening with the company. There were some very exciting developments in the market, from the clinical studies that were coming out, supporting the technology and the need, and the unmet $10 billion cost to the U.S. healthcare system was very interesting to me. And then the board asked me to take a role. I sat down with Fred Moll, and he said, swing for the fences, I'll support you any way I can. It's really the ethos of Silicon Valley, and it's what Silicon Valley's built its ecosystem on, is helping others. And I'm forever indebted to Fred for everything he has done for myself and for Potrero.
And did you have any concerns as a first-time CEO coming in? Were there jitters or...
It wasn't so much jitters. It was more, there are 4 stages of learning. There's unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, competence, unconscious competence. And
Right.
so I knew that coming in, there would be things that I wouldn't know and that I would experience for the first time. It's just knowing that that learning curve that is no matter what you take on. So I wasn't nervous so much as I was anxious to jump in and roll the sleeves up and figure out the puzzle.
Yeah, and I think was Fred part of the board already?
No.
So let's just go, because there's a bunch of Fred Moll fans out there.
Yeah. So Fred was not part of the board. When he and I sat down and I told him that I was going to take over the CEO role of Potrero, and he said, I'll support you with whatever you need. And about a month into my tenure, he came in and saw the technology. And I think as a surgeon, he was impressed, and he saw the need for acute kidney injury. It's something that every hospital in the world deals with in the ICU and the OR, especially in very traumatic cases, whether it's trauma, burn, or post-cardiac surgery. The kidneys are at significant risk. He saw that, and we invited him to join the board, and he joined November of 2017.
Good.
It's been fantastic.
Yeah, he always is. He's amazing.
Yeah, he
He's
is.
just amazing. And so, Eric, you hung up your shingle as an investor.
Yeah.
And put an enormous amount of belief and trust in this system. What were the decisions that you went through? And share them if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's similar but different to Joe's. So my point of contact initially was, Dr. Daniel Burnett, the founder here of Theranova, and his team. And, in part of my diligence of the technology, I got to know everyone at the Theranova community, everyone in particular who was working on Respirix very well. And what really impressed me was not only how credible these people are as scientists and the quality of their work, but also how genuinely passionate they are about the AAA mandate of building technologies to increase access to health care, lower the cost of care, and improve patient outcomes. And so the combination of sort of their pedigree and the mission to positively change the world gave me really a lot of confidence that I was partnering with a group of people that were in it for the right reasons and had, in my opinion, a unique chance to succeed in a competitive space.
And so you're at a situation right now earlier in the life of Respirix, and then watching Joe maybe just 1 or 2 lanes ahead of you.
Yeah.
What do you observe as you go through this, and what you watch Joe doing, and the board and the council and the guidance he gets that gives you comfort in knowing you're part of the Theranova family?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Joe has, I think, done a phenomenal job bringing in, an A-list group of backers who are not only providing financial capital but have tremendous expertise and knowledge in this difficult and challenging sector. And so that's been, from my perspective, very impressive. And frankly, I'll let Joe talk further, but I think it's a great roadmap for the companies like ours as we scale in this incubator and approach commercialization, which is probably closer than we think as we build this.
Yeah, and I know we're going into Respirix a little later on the details of that, but the simplicity of that tied to the data analytics just is mind-bending to me. But again, that's part of the essence of a lot of the tech coming out of Theranova, Joe, right? That's data analytics.
I think that's been a cornerstone of Theranova. Dan Burnett's an MD. He was undergrad. He has a unique background. If you don't mind me, I'll give a quick background on Dan. Undergrad, University of Pennsylvania in biomedical engineering, so he had that natural curiosity on how to make things. Became an MBA at Duke, where he studied critical care medicine, residency at Mayo. Then
slouch.
Exactly, and then went to the FDA for a year. After the FDA, spent a year as a VC, and then from there started Theranova. And I think what it's really afforded him is that cross-spectrum ability to look at a problem and solve it from a engineering standpoint, understand what the requirements would be at the FDA, and then how to present it to the investment community. And so from that standpoint, it's been very interesting to watch Dan take a technology, apply predictive analytics to it, bring it to market with funding, and be able to get through the FDA. It has been just remarkable, and he does it usually in record time. So from that standpoint, I've learned a ton just hanging around Dan and listening.
Yeah,
It's been fantastic.
And one of the things that's super interesting about Theranova is the agility and thriftiness they have around their model and the way Dan has structured the organization with like best in class at the disposal of the 6 or 7 or 8 properties that fall within the Theranova family. And from my perspective as a talent guy is when you can give me somebody who would be making $400,000 or $500,000 at head of clinical affairs at one of the strategics decides to come here, I get that mindset and that high precision sort of fidelity and advice like whenever I need it. Yet I don't have to incur that burn on a monthly basis.
That's right. And what Dan does expertly is he, and this has been 11 years of learning, he does it on a shoestring budget, but without sacrificing the clinical utility. Right. And so that's been pretty neat. And where he's brought the company is exactly where medicine is going, with applying the technology aspect to devices that traditionally have just resided in the body and done one simple task. And now he's taking that and creating a platform engine across different companies. And that, to me, was one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to be a part of Potrero. Was I know how hard the problem is, but then I also know just having conversations with Dan, sitting on the board, where his original vision for Potrero was to take it and provide these deep insights on the patients that are just, those insights are invisible today.
Yeah, and you and I came up with this term when I was here a couple months ago. The patient is always on.
Always.
The data's there.
It's been there, and it's just a matter of taking that data and creating actionable insights for the medical team. Right now, they're in the ICU and the operating room. They're in a very complex and oftentimes chaotic environment. The patients are some of the most difficult patients in the hospital from a complexity standpoint. And the doctors and nurses are among the best trained, most highly educated in the hospital. And they're still they're struggling because the technology hasn't evolved as it should have. And I think we're about to see a pretty remarkable evolution in critical care medicine and the way that patients are treated in the hospital.
Eric, you and I chatted earlier this morning before we set up, and we were talking about a recent meeting you were at. And it's starting to become very clear that the potential acquirers or investors are falling outside of MedTech. We were talking about consumer potential investors, insurance. Want to chat about that a little bit?
It's very exciting to me, really, that the landscape of the corporates that are really involved and engaged in what we're doing is changing, in my opinion, in some sense for the better, right? Because these are people that have not been traditionally medtech investors putting capital behind, legacy products like hip implants or stents. And so the projects that Joe and I have the luxury of working on here at Theranova, where we're mining unique physiological signals and developing predictive ways, prognostic ways to improve a patient, is appealing to the insurers in Asia, to all the household brand names we have like Amazon and Apple. And so the idea that we can actually engage and work with them and sell our product to them in the future is hugely exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's super interesting to explore. Is in the data analytics world, data really is where the money is when it comes to the patient. I think if you take this downrange 7, 8, 9 years, you're going to have the device manufacturers who are going to be building the things and holding down the rent and keeping the employees making things, and then you're going to have the data that's spun off from that device.
That's right. I think what we're seeing is there will be, similar to what you're seeing with self-driving cars and other AI engines that are being created, it's a race for quality and quantity of data. The more data you have for your machine learning algorithm, the tighter the algorithm becomes, and the greater space that you create in the market. And so for us, we understand that as we commercially scale this year and next, it's going to be important to develop a device and a monitor that is affordable for the hospitals, but also that we can start to truly analyze the algorithm and tighten it over time. That's what's going to give a Potrero or Respirix or any of the Theranova companies a competitive edge with some of the legacy companies in the industry.
And Eric, on the side of clinical trials, to Joe's point, the larger the data set, the more valuable the tech becomes.
That's right. That's right.
So you can piggyback your tech and your clinicals on existing data in the market and devices in the market.
That's right. I mean, we've been, I can't take all the credit here, frankly. It's really, Dan and the team have been very, very clever in the ways we've been able to implement, a lot of clinical studies, animal studies to date, and do that in a very capital efficient manner, which is the Theranova way. And we're going to continue to do that, as we are now charting out 2 new clinical trials that we're very excited about. We're even more focused on a lower dollar per heartbeat, call it acquisition cost, right, to mine for these algorithms. And so that's been exciting to have that kind of, to be able to work with such experts at optimizing these kinds of clinical trials. It's been great.
And then, Joe, as a first-time CEO, would you chat a little bit, given where you are right now, and maybe giving Eric a little bit of a horizon on where he's going to be in no time at all? What does it mean to have the board and the guidance and the coaching as a first-time CEO?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate and blessed to have the board of directors and advisors that we have. From Fred Moll, having started Origin Med Systems and Intuitive Surgical, Hansen Medical, and now Auris, plus having coached and sat on the boards of 20 to 30 companies over the years. He's pretty much seen everything and is able to accelerate the learning. So that's been fantastic. Working with Dan on a daily basis prior to us extracting to our new HQ in about 3 weeks has been wonderful. Having the access to ask him the questions, because over 11 years, he's seen it. And when I was going through the fundraising, that's not an easy thing to do, is raise money. Dan and our board has been right next to me and helping as I've navigated those new waters. And the traditional investors that are on our board are available every single day. If I need to bounce something off of them, it's been pretty fantastic. Our newest board member is Jay Watkins. He started Origin with Fred, was in business development at Guidant. They sold Origin to Guidant, and he's started or led companies over his last 30 years. So having an operator, somebody that can give the tough advice that helps a first-time CEO has been invaluable working with a guy like Jay Watkins. So for me, it's been neat. Our board of advisors, from a technical standpoint, what we're doing has, for the most part, not been done before, especially in the ICU to the extent that we're building it out that I know of. And having a guy like Rajan Patel, the head of search at Google, talk to us and our data team about the algorithm and how to structure it and give us different ways to look at it has been really neat. Shahid Shah is a global expert in EMR integration, and he is working with our team weekly and helping to ensure that the technology and the engine that we're building can speak to the hospital EMR, which is not a nice to have, it's a requirement nowadays. And then Greg Shears at the Mayo Clinic has been helping us from a clinical standpoint, like the feature vectors that we put into the machine learning algorithm and how to model it from a clinical standpoint to offer the greatest clinical utility to the medical teams has really been a value to our team. We have Dan Burnett, who's a doctor, and Fred, but it's also great to have the operator that's on the ground every day, today, and to understand those needs. And then finally, as the world moves towards cloud computing, having a guy like John Ingates who stood up Rackspace and was the chief technology officer, you can't get any better than that as far as creating that infrastructure. So I would say for Eric, he's doing an outsider looking in. It's been neat to see him standing up a team of advisors and mentors similar to where we are, and it's been fantastic to see. And I would credit Eric and Dan for looking at the problem and then addressing it with some of the best advisors in the world.
Yeah, and that's the Theranova way.
That's right.
And I think as we get more and more experience, the outside world, investors, collaborators, licensing will look at this and say, this is a Theranova property or a Theranova leader. And again, you have access to Joe. Joe has access to you. So this mind share in the incubator is really amazing.
No, absolutely. I think everything Joe says is right. He's his playbook is very shrewd, and I keep Joe on speed dial for the next round. So, but we are lucky. We've brought in some very savvy advisors to Respirix. So, you'll meet Ricardo Turquetto later. His day job is optimizing ad sales at Google, but he's been able to apply his skills to actually improve our ability to predict patient health using our signal, which has been fantastic. We have a guy named Dr. Jeffrey Tyson here at UCSF. He's a very forward-thinking cardiologist who's really excited about new ways to use digital health technologies to manage a patient. We've got Dr. Paul Marino in New York, who's dynamite. So he's actually a quite famous ICU physician. He's got a book called the ICU Book, which has sold over 1 million copies to date. He's extremely excited about applications for Respirix beyond what we've been discussing. So actually, taking it to the hospital for patient monitoring. And we also have Dr. Tessa Walters, who's an anesthesiologist here, in Palo Alto, Stanford trained, who's fantastic. So it's been really great building that cohort around the company. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Well, we're going to keep our eyes on both of these properties as well as all the Theranova properties. I appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy day today and sharing the story.
Thank you so much. No, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, and we'll be back again, I guess, in about another 30, 45 days with updates. So I appreciate it. Thanks for your time today, guys.
Thanks again.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, great.
Be well.